right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back in the plenary session. We'll give ourselves about 30 seconds for everyone to join us. Wasn't that a fantastic career day? I think I went to several rooms. I heard engineers. I heard agriculture scientists. I heard teachers. I heard cybersecurity. I heard dentists. So that was just absolutely phenomenal. So the next voice that you'll hear will be our astronaut and main speaker. Major General Charles Bolden, again, is a decorated U.S. Marine Corps aviator. He flew A-6s in Vietnam. He has over 100 combat missions. He then went to become a test pilot, and then went to the astronaut program. One of his mentors was the late Ron McNair. His son is an aviator. He's a family man, a mentor to all of us, and he's the former director of NASA. So with no further ado, we will go to Major General Charles Bolden.
Thanks very much, and hello to all of you. I was so glad to have an opportunity to skip around to a few of the breakout sessions, and as I was telling the kids in the middle school group, that was the smart group. So glad I had a chance to drop in on all of you. I will join all the other speakers earlier today in saying how much we appreciate your taking the time to spend this time today, getting an opportunity to hear about people who have done some of the things that you may want to do. I don't want to talk a lot because I want to try to get to the questions that you may have for me. But I thought I would start by just telling you how I ended up doing what I'm doing now. And for those of you who don't know, I am wearing a NASA bike shirt. I ride a bicycle for exercise now. I don't run anymore because of my knees, but I ride my bicycle and I try to ride every day. And this is my NASA bike shirt. I happen to be in Cape Canaveral, Florida right now, so I'm not at home. We live outside of Washington, D.C. in a place called Crystal City, Virginia, or Arlington, Virginia. But I came down for the scheduled SpaceX launch that was supposed to happen tonight, but now will probably happen tomorrow night. And it's a very special time for me because one of the crew members, the pilot on the crew, is Victor Glover, who looks like all of us. Victor, I think some of you who were on earlier may have seen the video about him with his family. But Victor and the other 3 members of his crew are down here in quarantine and over at the Kennedy Space Center, and they're all anxious to go fly tomorrow. But anyway, so that's what I'm doing here, and I'm really excited about it. I grew up in Columbia, South Carolina. Now, I'm not sure whether any of you on the line are from South Carolina at all. Hopefully there's somebody there. But when I grew up, the schools were segregated. They weren't the way they are today. So black kids went to one set of schools and white kids went to another set of schools. One of the things, though, that was, I guess, a misconception about it was that our education wasn't very good. You've heard several of the speakers earlier today talk about the quality education they got from historically black colleges and universities. And I would say the same thing. Although our schools were segregated, our teachers were really devoted and dedicated to us. And so I got a pretty good education growing up in South Carolina. There was one thing, though, that changed my life when I was 12 years old. So for some of the middle school kids, when I was in 7th grade, I saw a program on television called Men of Annapolis, and it was about life at the Naval Academy. Now Matt has mentioned to you all several times about the Naval Academy, and I know we have at least 2 midshipmen on the line here, but I went to the same school they went to. My wife went to a historically black college. She went to Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia, as did my daughter. But my son and I we ventured off and we went to the Naval Academy, and both ended up coming into the Marine Corps and both ended up as aviators. But I saw this program called Men of Annapolis about life at the Naval Academy. I had no idea, no clue what the Navy did or what it was like. I just loved the way the campus looked. I loved the uniforms. They would wear these high collars and everything and all formal. And so I decided that's where I want to go to college. And that's what I started working on from the age of 12. I had to get an appointment from either your senator or from your congressional representative, and everybody was eligible for an appointment from the Vice President of the United States. So I wrote to all of them. But back then, My two U.S. senators and my congressional representative made it very clear to me that they were not going to appoint a black to the Naval Academy. So my hope became getting an appointment from then Vice President Lyndon Johnson. However, unfortunately for me, my senior year in high school, President John Kennedy was assassinated and Lyndon Johnson became the president. So I tell you all that to say, so on the day that President Kennedy was assassinated, it was a really, really dark day for a lot of reasons. For me, losing a president, but also because I knew that it probably meant I was not going to get to go to the Naval Academy because I wasn't eligible for a presidential appointment, and Vice President Johnson became the president. But I did something that my mom and dad encouraged me to do, and you've had several of the speakers today encourage you to do. I really wanted to go to the Naval Academy. I was passionate about it. And they said, if you want to go, write the president and tell him you want to go. And so I did that. I took a piece of paper and a pen and I wrote a letter to President Lyndon Johnson. And I said, Mr. President, you know, you and I have been talking through letters for a number of years now. And I know I'm not eligible for an appointment to the Naval Academy from you, but I really, really, really want to go there. Can you help me? Never heard from him, but within a few weeks, a Navy recruiter showed up at my door and asked for me, said, hey, I understand you want to go to the Naval Academy. A few weeks later, the president sent a retired federal judge around the country looking for young black men and Hispanic who were interested in going to the service academies. Women were not admitted at that time, so they were only looking for young men. And by virtue of doing all that, I ended up getting an appointment from Congressman William Dawson in Chicago, Illinois. And I went there. And when I left high school, there were two things that I knew, absolutely knew I would not do. I was definitely not going to fly airplanes because that was inherently dangerous. Got that, Matt? No way in the world I was going to fly airplanes. And Vice Admiral Davis, that's all he ever wanted to do. I had no desire to get anywhere close to an airplane. The second thing I was not going to do was I was not going to be a Marine because I thought Marines were crazy. So with those two things that I knew I was not going to do, I started my time at the Naval Academy. And my first year, my company officer or mentor or advisor happened to be a young Marine Corps major who was an infantry officer. And he impressed me unbelievably. He was like my dad. He was really tough, but unbelievably fair. And so 4 years later, when it was time to graduate, I said, you know, I can do anything I want to do. I can sail ships. I can probably go fly airplanes, but I don't want to do that. I want to be like him. His name was Major John Riley Love. And I said, I want to be like him. I want to be a Marine. So I chose the Marine Corps because of the impression that a person had made on me. Some of you are going to do the same thing in your lives. You're going to choose to be a teacher or a dentist or a doctor or a lawyer or an aviator because of somebody in your life that impressed you. Once I came into the Marine Corps, going through my first 6 months of training to learn how to be a rifle platoon commander, an infantry officer, I found I didn't like crawling around in the mud. And my wife did not like the idea of me being a Marine anyway, and she did not like the prospect of me going to Vietnam. So she kept harping on me why don't we go to Pensacola, Florida? And I said, I don't want to go to Pensacola. That's where they fly airplanes, and I don't want to fly airplanes. And she kept insisting. So I finally gave up, and I said, okay, we'll go to Pensacola. And we went to Pensacola, and first time I got in an airplane and felt the wheels lift off, I mean, there was something in my chest, in my whole body that said, wow, I cannot believe this. This is really, really super. And so I fell in love with flying, and the rest is sort of history. I had no desire whatsoever to become an astronaut. I knew about the space program, but that did not impress me. And then another thing happened in my life. I decided I wanted to be a test pilot, and I managed to get to do that. And I was in a place called Patuxent River, Maryland. And the same time I was there, NASA had selected their first group of space shuttle astronauts. And among that group in 1978 were 3 African-American men, all 2 of them were military, 2 were Air Force, and the late great Dr. Ron McNair. And Ron and I did not know each other, but he and I had grown up about 42 miles from each other in South Carolina. He grew up in Lake City, South Carolina, and I grew up in Columbia. But unlike me, Ron had always, all his life, wanted to be an astronaut. And so that's what he focused on. He went to North Carolina A&T, got his undergraduate degree, and then accepted a slot at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where he earned his doctorate, his PhD in laser physics, and became one of the world's foremost laser physicists. And when NASA advertised for people to come into the space program, he applied and he was accepted in the first group. So he came back from Houston up to Pax River, where I was, along with some of the Navy and Marine Corps pilots who had trained there. And I saw this black guy get out of the back of this sleek looking NASA T-38. And I was mesmerized. I said, boy, I didn't know they had, you know, one, I didn't realize that they flew those kinds of airplanes, but I didn't realize that there was a guy who looked like me there. I hadn't really paid much attention to it. And so Ron and I talked the whole weekend, and I was really impressed, but not impressed enough that I was going to apply for the space program. But before he went back to Houston, he said, hey, are you going to apply for the program? I said, not on your life. And he looked at me real strange. He said, why not? I said, they'd never pick me, Ron. And he said, you know, that is the dumbest thing I ever heard. I mean, that's dumb. How do you know they won't pick you if you don't ask? And more than anything else, I was embarrassed because my mom and dad had been my teachers growing up, and they had always told me I could do anything I wanted to do if I was willing to work and apply myself. And I had forgotten that. So when Ron went back to Houston, I got my paper and pencil out and I applied for the astronaut program, got nominated by the Marine Corps to NASA, had an opportunity to go interview in Houston, Texas. And lo and behold, when they selected the second group of space shuttle astronauts, I was in that group. So that's how I happened to do that. Somebody really encouraged me, mentored me, pushed me, embarrassed me, and made me decide to do it. So that's how I got to be an astronaut. I can tell you some other stuff, but let me do a real quick thing here. I'm going to try to share my screen with you if I can, and show you so you can get to questions. But okay, you don't want to see that. That's the title. I don't know if any of you recognize the folk in that picture. Those are the 4 crew members with their SpaceX Crew Dragon right behind them. They took this picture right down here at the Kennedy Space Center not many days ago. Anybody notice what they're wearing? Come off your mic and yell it. What are they wearing?
Masks.
Why are they wearing masks?
Masks.
Themselves.
Okay.
Masks.
To protect themselves and to protect other people. This 4-person crew is getting ready to go to space, and they're going to be living for the next 6 months on the International Space Station. So we cannot afford for them to get sick and take coronavirus to the International Space Station. So that's why they're wearing the mask. I see somebody just kind of, I hope they were trying to point to Victor, but right, I don't know whether you can see my arrow, but the guy on the right is Victor Glover. And let me go back one, but I think we're being hacked. But anyway, Victor is the person on the right. He is only the second African-American pilot to fly a spacecraft in 26 years. So I flew last 26 years ago, and Victor will fly tomorrow night. And that's unacceptable. So he and I are working on solving that problem, on making sure that doesn't happen. This is the International Space Station. People live and work on this now for 6 months at a time. And every once in a while, we have somebody that lives there for a year. We had one American, Scott Kelly, who lived on the International Space Station about 2 years ago. He was there with his Russian counterpart, and they both were there for 1 whole year. So we've now been living and working on the International Space Station for 20 plus years. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary a few weeks ago. So that's the International Space Station. I'm going to show you this, and I'm just going to be quiet and let you look. But this is kind of stuff they do. This is Mike Hopkins. He's Victor Glover's commander on this flight company. That's Scott Kelly, who lived on the space station for a year. That's the first time we ate lettuce that we actually grew on the International Space Station. So they now grow a lot of their own food: beans, lettuce, tomatoes, little cherry tomatoes.
That's the only reason I really don't be coming up. Because you always tell me.
This is our planet. And a couple of things for some of you who think you want to live on Mars. I'm a big fan of Mars, and I want to go to Mars one of these days. I do not want to stay there. This is the only planet in our solar system that we know can sustain life today. We study places like Mars and Venus, and we're now beginning with telescopes like the Hubble Space Telescope and the soon to be flown James Webb Space Telescope. We're trying to learn about Earth-like planets in other galaxies and other solar systems. So one of these days, we may find another planet that's like our own planet Earth, but this is our planet Earth, and we have to take care of it, because right now, it's the only place that we know of that can sustain life the way that we know it. Anybody know what that circle is, that ball going around Earth? Anybody know?
The moon.
That's our moon. And because we're looking at it through a camera that's 1.5 million kilometers away from Earth, you're actually seeing what we call the backside of the moon. The moon goes around Earth. It rotates on its own axis, just like Earth does, but it rotates on its axis once every 28 days. So as it goes around Earth, we only see one side of it. So the lit side of the moon that we see all the time is the only side we see, because it's rotating slow enough that we never get to see the backside. So you're getting to see the backside of the moon here. So I think that's my my little slideshow. I'll get back to you. Couple of things. I hate giving advice, so don't take this as advice. Take this as what I learned myself. Okay, 3 things my mom and dad taught me. Like I said, my mother was my middle school librarian. I was her library assistant. My father was my high school football coach. And like I said, he was really tough. I was a quarterback, not very good. So I was the 2nd string quarterback. So I played for my dad in high school. And he had a saying: it's not the size of the dog in the fight, but the size of the fight in the dog. So for some of you who may be a little bit smaller than the average bear, don't worry about it. I was just like you. I was 4 feet 11, and I weighed 84 pounds when I went to 9th grade in high school. I'm not much bigger than that nowadays, but anyway. So study really hard. I think several of the speakers have said that today. Study, study, study. People ask me a lot, what do I need to study? Of course you need math and science, but you also need foreign languages, because every time you learn a language, you learn a little bit about the culture of the people who speak that language. You need to understand history, particularly for us, for people of color. We have to understand our history, otherwise we're destined to repeat it, and we cannot do that. We're in a critical time of our lives right now, all of us, as we suffer through this COVID pandemic, but also a period of awakening on the part of a lot of people about social and racial injustice. And we have to know our history so that we can be champions to make sure that the world of the future is not the same as the world of today. So study really hard. Second thing is work really hard. And when I talk about working, what I really mean is practice. Just practice, practice, practice. For those of you who are athletes or dancers or singers, you wouldn't think about going into a performance without practicing and practicing and practicing. Your coaches tell you all the time, you got to practice, practice, practice. You got to work hard if you want to be a champion. Why would you think you can go in the classroom and be good without working hard at it? So when you go to the classroom, work really hard at the subject matter so that you try to become the best person in the world in that particular subject. You may not be, but at least by trying, you'll be better off than most people. And the final thing is never, ever, ever be afraid of failure. Failure is a part of life. Many of us will tell you, many of us adults will tell you, some of our greatest lessons were learned through our failure. And we came out on the other side. When we got up off the ground and figured out what went wrong, we came out and we were much stronger and much better for it. So study really hard, work really hard. Don't ever be afraid of failure. You can do anything you want to do. You just have to set your mind to it. I'll close with a saying that I love. It's from a young man who died of AIDS in a place called KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa, a long time ago, back in 2001. And his name was Nkosi Johnson. And he was a champion for AIDS and also for equal rights of Black people on the African continent. But before he died, he met with an American writer who noticed that he was always smiling and always upbeat and never cried out in pain, never said anything about himself, was always giving people direction, always trying to help other people. And although he died at the age of 12, when this writer, Jim Wooten, talked to him, he said, Nkosi, I don't understand. He said, you're never sad. You never ask for anything. What makes you tick? Why do you do what you do? And Nkosi looked up at him and he smiled and he said, you do all you can with what you have in the time that you have in the place that you are. Do all you can with what you have in the time that you have in the place that you are. That's all anybody can ask of you. So thanks so very much for allowing me to be with you all. We've got some time, and I think I'm going to turn it back over to Matt, and we're going to try to answer some questions for you all, I think. Is that right, Matt?
Yes, sir. We're going to go to question and answer. And when you ask your question, please state your name and your age so that we get your first name only and your age so that we know who you are. And then, sir, as you answer the questions, we have Dr. Warwick on the line and Vice Admiral Brewer and Vice Admiral Davis, sir. So we have a cadre to respond to the questions. But children, it's an honor to have Astronaut Bolden. So we're open up for questions.
Don't forget, he said you can ask it to any of the four of us. They don't all go to me. I'm going to put Admiral Brewer to work if nobody asks him a question.
Yes, sir.
Sir, Dylan Watford sent a chat asking a question. Do the astronauts have to take vitamins and use a sunlight lamp in space?
Dylan, we don't use a sunlight lamp. In fact, one of the things that we do is we actually put filters on the windows so that they don't get too much sunlight into the spacecraft. One of the things, what is it? Who knows what protects us from the radiation of the sun? Anybody know? What about our
ozone layer?
Yeah, it's our atmosphere. We live inside a bubble, and our atmosphere shields us from the harsh radiation of the sun. When we're in space, we're outside that bubble. We're outside the magnetosphere and outside our atmosphere, and so the sun can be pretty harsh on astronauts. They actually, as you're going around, you go around Earth once every 90 minutes. And so you're in darkness for 45 minutes, in light for 45 minutes. You see the sun rise and set 16 times every normal Earth day. So your daylight is 45 minutes, nighttime's 45 minutes, and just alternates like that. An astronaut who's outside doing a spacewalk in the sunlight, the suit feels up to 250 degrees Fahrenheit of heat on the outside. On the outside in the dark, it's minus 250 degrees. So an astronaut inside the spacesuit goes through a 500-degree temperature swing. But your question about vitamins, we actually, we do three things to protect astronauts and to try to keep their bodies healthy, because bone loss is something we really worry about with gravity being overcome while we're in space. So we exercise. We have a lot of exercise devices that are not unlike what you would see in a gym down here. Gravity is overcome, but we use bungees and things to present the resistance so that it feels like we're down here on Earth. We have a very rigid diet, so we work out our diets with the dietitians before we even leave Earth. Some of you may remember the people with the chef hats on at the end. Those are some of our dietitians and cooks that prepare the foods for us. And then we always have pharmaceuticals, medication if we need it, for vitamin supplement or the other thing. The doctors look at the astronauts' health every single day. They record everything we eat and drink, And so they can send messages up every day to the astronauts saying, okay, Victor, you need a little bit more greens. So when you eat today, go and get some extra collard greens out, or some extra peas or something, because you need a little bit more vitamin D or whatever comes from green. So hopefully that answers your question.
Sir, Ethan wants to know, how did you prepare to go to space? He's 9 years
Even
old.
every crew member does, it takes about 2 years to get ready for a specific mission. The first year when you're assigned to be a crew member, and this comes on the heels of several years of just generic preparation. Everybody, if you're not a military pilot, everybody gets into the T-38 and learns how to fly, because we use the T-38 as a training aircraft to help us get accustomed to being in unusual attitudes and reacting quickly to unusual experiences and the like. And then we take courses like aerodynamics, meteorology, oceanography, geography. So again, it brings everybody up to speed so that we all know about the same amount. And nowadays, because we fly sometimes on Russian spacecraft, every crew member, every American astronaut has to learn to speak Russian. I didn't have to do that when I was there. So you do the generic training first, and then once you're assigned to a crew, you and your crew members train in a simulator. You go through over and over and over, learning all about the spacecraft that you're going to fly. And then the last part of that, you get together with the flight controllers and the flight directors on the ground around the world. And you go through what we call integrated simulations, where they throw in faults that we don't even see in the spacecraft. We don't know things are going wrong, but the people on the ground, because they have much finer instruments and gauges, they can see a leak, for example, days before we'll see it on board the spacecraft. So it's as much for training the ground crew to be able to take care of us as it is us. So it's about a 2-year period of time to get trained. You go through survival training, like I said, flight training, and then the training for the vehicle. Nowadays on the International Space Station, we don't get to do a lot of very specific training on the experiments we do, because a crew member may do as many as 200 experiments in the 6 months that they're on the International Space Station. So what we do is we teach crew members how to do basic laboratory kinds of work, and then we give them preparation. Either the principal investigator, the doctor doing the test, will send them some reading material that they can study up on it first. And nowadays, the doctors or the principal investigators can actually get on a mic, on a headset, and talk to the crew as they do the experiments. We couldn't do that when I was flying in the space shuttle.
Sir, Maria Figgins wants to know how many times you've been to space.
Maria, I flew 4 times. And remember now, I'm a space shuttle astronaut. I'm a wimp compared to what Victor and people do nowadays. A normal period of time on the International Space Station today is 6 months. So that's a normal mission. Very few people go for less than that, unless it's a space tourist or something like that. But a normal NASA crew member will go for at least 6 months, and sometimes as much as a year. My longest mission in the space shuttle was 9 days. So I had, in 4 flights, I had the equivalent of about a month in space. People think it's a lot, but my 680 hours are dwarfed by what people do today who go to the International Space Station.
Sir, Maria Bowman, who's 15 years old, wants to know if you get motion sickness in space.
Maria, some people do. I'm pretty lucky in that I didn't have any problem at all. We kind of call it space adaptation syndrome. It's not exactly like, it's not at all like the motion sickness that you feel, seasickness. Doctors don't completely understand it, but we attribute a lot of it to being just what we call the conflict theory, where your eyes tell you something's going on and your body doesn't tell the brain the same thing. With gravity having been overcome, you have no idea of up and down. So you could be upside down
It's
and
12 o'clock.
looking out the window or looking at something in the cabin, and it looks like everything's upright. And your brain goes, wait a minute, I'm confused here. Or you look out the window expecting Earth to be down there, and Earth may be up there. And the brain just gets confused. And if it's not able to resolve that, the brain sends a signal to your stomach sometimes, and all of a sudden you might feel mild stomach awareness, or some people actually get sick. Almost nobody suffers from space adaptation adaptation syndrome longer than a couple of days. So it takes about 2 days for people to adapt, and then you're pretty good. Some few people, very few people, experience a similar sensation when they come back to Earth. They're no longer in this microgravity environment, and they've got gravity pulling down on them all the time, and their body just takes it has a difficult time adjusting. And some of them get sick to the point that they have to have medication. But again, that happens very, very, very rarely.
Sir Ronan, who is in the 7th grade, wants to know who designs the space suits.
You know, Ronan, it depends on who you're flying with. The spacesuits that if you watch the launch tomorrow, and if you start watching a few hours earlier, you'll see the crew come out of the crew quarters down here at the Kennedy Space Center, where they got dressed in their suits. They'll be wearing SpaceX spacesuits. So there are suits that were designed by SpaceX suit designers in collaboration with colleges and universities around the country. When you see people fly in a Russian spacecraft, they're flying Russian spacesuits. So the spacesuits today, because we now have commercially provided spacecraft, the spacesuits are generally designed by the manufacturer of the spacecraft. So SpaceX has their own suits, Blue Origin has their own suits, NASA has its own suits. Today, though, for a spacewalk, we only have 2 spacesuits. We have or what we call extravehicular mobility units. One is a Russian model and one's an American model. But we're working really hard, both with academia, with colleges and universities, and with industry, to try to come up with a much more streamlined suit, one that's much more efficient and effective and doesn't weigh quite as much as the suit today. Today's spacesuit weighs about 300 pounds down here on the ground. The good thing is when you're in space, it doesn't weigh anything because you're weightless. So, you know, you can get around, but it's still a 300-pound suit. It's really bulky and not easy to work in.
Sir Andrea, who's 16 years old, says that since there are a lot of developments being made in space exploration and space travel, what do you project will be the best track to becoming an astronaut in the near future?
The absolutely greatest thing about today, was that Angela?
Andrea?
Andrea. The best thing about today, and all of you on this session today should know, any one of you that wants to be an astronaut can become one, because there are any number of avenues for you to get there. You may not want to go in the military, and in fact, most of NASA's astronauts today, more than half of NASA's astronauts today, are not military people. They're not the old kind of astronaut that used to be a test pilot. We have doctors, we have engineers, some pilots, some flight officers, or what we in the Navy and Marine Corps call naval flight officers. But a lot of the astronauts today, at least from the United States, are scientists and medical doctors and researchers. If you want to fly with one of the commercial providers, like a SpaceX or Virgin Galactic, or even Blue Origin soon, you go through their selection process, and you don't ever come in contact with NASA. So Virgin does what we call suborbital flight. They have a spacecraft, a space rocket that drops from its carrier aircraft and then lights its rocket engine and flies up, zooms up into space, turns itself over, and then comes back down. So they spend about 20 minutes in space and come back down, just like Alan Shepard did, the first American to go to space. So that's what we call suborbital space flight. You don't actually go around Earth, but you go into space and right back down. For orbital space flight, there's a little bit more involved in the training and everything else, but you can still engage in orbital space flight going through one of the private companies. There are now private schools to go through for test piloting. When I became a test pilot, there were only 2 places in the United States you could go. You could go to Edwards Air Force Base to the Air Force Aerospace Test Pilot School, or you could go to Patuxent River, Maryland to the Navy's Test Pilot School, or you could go to France or England. So there were only 4 test pilot schools in the world. Today, there's a test pilot school in Mojave that's civilian run. There's a test pilot school in New Mexico. So there's all kinds of ways that you can go to space without actually having to go through NASA or the military. So hopefully you'll take up one of those. I want to see you on Mars with me.
Sir, Maria has another question for you. She wants to know, what did you have to do with the Hubble Space Telescope?
Oh, Maria, it's you know, I don't have a favorite mission, but that's one of those that stands way up there because that was my second flight to space on the Space Shuttle Discovery. I was the pilot or co-pilot when we took the Hubble Space Telescope to space and lifted it out of the payload bay of the shuttle with the remote manipulator system, the mechanical arm, the robot arm. We lifted it out and got it all configured and then released it and put it into space in 1990. So Hubble has been in space now for 30 years because we've done 5 Hubble servicing missions, which means we've sent astronauts up and they've changed out components. We've actually changed out almost everything, every part of Hubble that was on the original Hubble Space Telescope. It's really an observatory. It's multiple telescopes, but it has 6 brand new instruments in it. The solar arrays, this is the 3rd generation of solar arrays on it. It's got all new batteries. So it's a pretty new observatory, but I was on the crew that put the original Hubble Space Telescope into orbit. And I'm very proud of that.
Sir, Ronan is very interested in knowing, do you work with astrophysics as well as math and engineering?
Ronan, I got to get some of the engineers on here to answer. I work around astrophysicists. They're too smart. Those are, remember I told you, nowadays more than half of the astronauts, the NASA astronauts, are no longer pilots. Pilots like me, we're good at what we do. We know how to fly airplanes and we're smart, but the engineers and the scientists and all the PhDs that we worked around, they're really smart. And so I flew with a couple of astrophysicists several times and they just kind of dwarf you. One of the reasons when I went down for my interview in Houston in the winter of 1980, I came back and I told my wife, there is no way in the world I'm going to get selected to be an astronaut. There are too many smart people in the world. And I had interviewed, we interviewed 200 people. NASA goes through thousands of applications and they pick 200 people to bring to Houston to interview over a 2-week period of time now. A lot of psychological evaluation, medical tests, and everything else. I went down with 19 others in my group. And I mean, guys and girls with degrees from up here around their neck all the way down to their fingertips. And I didn't think I would compete, but I did pretty well. And I'll tell you why. It always, and I'm trying to remember, I was in one of your sessions and one of the speakers said, always carry a pen and paper and always ask lots of questions. I will add, never, ever, ever be embarrassed or ashamed to speak up. When I went through my astronaut session, my week of evaluation, the highlight of the week was a 2-hour interview. You stood at one end of a big green table and there were people all around the table who represented the engineering community, the astronaut office, human capital, personnel people and everything. And you talk to them for 2 hours and they ask you all kinds of off the wall questions. And having sat on a selection board now, I can tell you, we didn't have any doubts about people's technical qualifications. What we wanted to find out in the interview was, how do they present themselves? Are they poised? Are they confident? Will they represent NASA well? Probably tell you, even in the Navy, Marine Corps, when you get ready to go into a school as an instructor, one of the things that you get groomed on is, they call it charm school, and they want you to be able to talk to your students and communicate effectively with them. So they were really looking to see how I communicated and how I responded when they asked what I would think maybe were stupid questions or trivial questions. But I think I did pretty well. So I ended up being selected. And I tell people all the time, my 8 years working for President Obama as the NASA administrator, I was essentially what you call the voice and the face of NASA. So people saw me and heard me all the time talking about the space agency and all the work we did. And I would always tell the people who work with me in NASA, Don't ever let me embarrass you. You know, don't let me go out and say something that's not right. When you hear me go through my preparation, do not be embarrassed about raising your hand and say, sir, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. That is not correct. I don't know who told you that, because I am going to go out and represent all of you. And you should all be the same way when you're in positions of authority. Tell people, don't let you go out and look stupid. You know, if you will almost never be the smartest person in the room. That's not what's important. What's important is for you to be smart enough to know that you need to have really smart people around you to help you run your organization. I'm going to ask Admiral Brewer here. Admiral Brewer, on your ships, what would you have been if you thought you were the smartest person on the ship? How do you think your ships would have done?
Not very well. Because, you know, one of the things that I always said is that you're only as good as the people who work for you. And my philosophy is very simple. There are two types of leaders. There are ladder builders and there are ladder climbers. Ladder climbers are people who really focus just basically on themselves and their own personal accomplishments. Ladder builders are people who understand very clearly that your success is based on the success that you generate in others. Ladder climbers also have a tendency to fail.
Yeah.
And when they fail, because they walked over the backs of a lot of people, they find themselves nobody there to support them. For the young people, what that really means is that if you're on a football team, a basketball team, or any kind of a team, you want to be a team player. You just don't want to be somebody out there trying to, you know, set all the records, etc. Your success is really embedded in your team.
You know, Admiral Davis, you might add, not only were you highly successful in the Navy, but you came out and started your own company, and people come to you now seeking wisdom. I can imagine, you know, what you did to put this session together today, because I happen to know you went out and you got really smart young people, like Matt Bowman and others. So you got anything you want to add to it?
Well, Tyrone both would answer that question the same. We went out and got Matt Bowman and Quan Hurst, and we know what influence they can have with the people like you when you work with them, because they have that enthusiasm for their work, and they know how to put together a team. Yeah. As Admiral Brewer mentioned, when you aboard ship on the aircraft carrier had 5,000 people. I needed all 5,000, and every one of them is part of that team. You needed all of them, and Matt and Juan are really good at putting together a team, and we really want to thank you for being part of that team today. You've influenced me. I want to be an astronaut now.
I have one more question. Admiral Davis, didn't you command the Ranger?
I did.
For the kids, they may or may not appreciate this, but I'm going to tell this story. The USS Ranger is a huge, it may be razor blades now, I don't know.
It is.
Aircraft carriers are huge ships. And like Admiral Davis said, they have a 5,000 person crew on it. When Admiral Davis got there, the Ranger was called the Danger Ranger. And it had a reputation for being a horrible ship, absolutely horrible. They couldn't do anything right. To show you what happens when he left, having served as the commander of that ship, it was one of the best carriers in the Navy, and it was all because of the type of leadership that he exerted, the fact that he trusted his crew and he let them know that he depended on them making him successful, and they would work together. And that I always, you know, everybody in the Navy knows the story of the Danger Ranger and what Admiral Walt Davis did to turn that ship around. It doesn't happen very often in the Navy that you take a bad ship and make it good, and he did it. So I just wanted to tell that story about him.
I enjoyed every minute of it.
Well, to all of the flag officers, there are nearly 30 midshipmen on this call today.
Oh my goodness.
And the question is, how would they go about finding flag mentors, and how would the K through 12 students find mentors in this age of COVID-19, when many of them don't have the advantage of having in-person events?
Tyrone, you want to answer that question?
Absolutely, sir. Now,
Because
first of all,
Tyrone is the man.
let me let me say this, that this virtual community that we're doing today, these are really great opportunities to do so. What I would encourage all young people, where it is age appropriate, please join some of the different groups that are online, the educational groups that exist out there. And again, I think that connecting with professional organizations, we have a sustained mentoring program with BEYA Stars and Stripes that's run by Vice Admiral Andy Wins, as well as Jesse McCrary. That is one great place to tie in and to continue these kind of opportunities. Lastly, we have a book up called Becoming an Engineer. If you check your feed, check into that and follow blackengineer.com. We will have more and more resources available for young people to stay engaged during this pandemic. But the internet is a great way for us to stay together until we're able to see and meet each other in person again.
And the only thing I'll add for the midshipmen, since you asked the question, even in COVID, we're going to have another astronaut convocation coming up next year. We usually bring astronauts down to the campus and have an evening where they do a panel and talk about what it's like. We are going to be there. We may be virtual, but we're going to be there. So I would say take advantage of that. Make sure you participate. Make sure you ask lots of questions. And almost all of us respond to email. So, you know, we'll give you our email addresses. I'm certain that if you, because we didn't do it this time, if you send it to BEYA, they can put you in touch with me, I know, and I'll be more than happy to respond to things that people say, people ask.
Okay, back to you specifically, General Bolden. Gabby says that she noticed that you embraced change so much, even when you said there were things you didn't want to do in life, but you ended up doing them. So how did you embrace change so openly, and what was your mentality in moving into those new sectors in your career, even though you knew so little about them?
I will go back and I'll give the credit to my mom and dad. I tell people all the time, you know, I'm a Marine. I'm still a Marine. And we have something we call our core values. The Navy and the Marine Corps have the core values of honor, courage, and commitment. And we try to live that. And I tell people all the time when they talk about an ethics course or stuff like that, I argue with the lawyers all the time. I said, look, I got the best ethics course there was at my dinner table with my mom and dad. They taught me right and wrong. And they also, because we were living in the segregated South, my mom and dad said, there will be a day that we can make things different and we have to be prepared. And so they taught me to always be responsive to any opportunity that came my way. They said, you know, you may not know anything at all, but you probably know more than most people who are in there claiming to know everything. So do not be afraid to step up and offer whatever you can to help. And I would say to all of you, like I said, don't ever be afraid of failure. Usually, you know, we're afraid because we're a different color, or because we're a different sex, or because we're too short, or we're too heavy, or something else. We're afraid sometimes because we don't think we know enough. You know enough. You do know enough. And if you go and take advantage of all the assets that are available to you, whether it's online or in a library or something else, you can make yourself, you know, the best person in that particular field. So you should always strive to become the best person in the field, but never be embarrassed or never be timid about stepping up and speaking out.
Sir, Maria Bowman wants to know, what did you hear in space? And Ethan wants to know, is the Earth as beautiful from space as you expected?
Earth is much more beautiful, Ethan. I was overwhelmed. I literally cried. And I'm a wimpy guy anyway. Admiral Davis and Admiral Brew will tell you, I break down and cry all the time. I'm just emotional. But I literally, I mean, tears rolled down my cheek. My very first space shuttle mission, I had spent a lot of time learning about the continent of Africa because I wanted to be able to look down and see the, you know, some of the countries from which my ancestors may have come. And I'm not sure why I thought I would see all these lines on the map. I mean, down there on the ground, but we, about 15 minutes into flight, we had left the Kennedy Space Center. I looked out in front of us and there was this, what looked like a big island. I mean, a big island. And it didn't take me very long to realize that that was the continent of Africa. That was my home continent. And there were no lines. I couldn't tell one country from another one. They all just kind of blended. And it, you know, it occurred to me that what my mom and dad had taught me about all of us being the same, about people all being the same, it just kind of hit me that this was one planet, one ocean, one world in which we all either survived together or we perished together. And I literally cried. It just moved me that way. We take some incredible pictures with the cameras we have. I have not seen any camera yet that can give you the pictures that God's cameras give to the human eye. So it is absolutely spectacular. So I got carried away on that one and I forgot the first question. I got to the second question first.
Yes, sir, you did. The first question was, what did you hear?
You know, believe it or not, you can't hear anything in space. And I'm being technical here. You would not find yourself outside a spacecraft without a suit on. So you always hear something because you're in a spacesuit. But if you were able to get out without a spacesuit on, because it's a vacuum. So it's got little molecules of air, but they're like blocks away and stuff like that. So there's no way for sound to make its way through space. So you don't hear anything. Inside the spacecraft, though, you hear crinkling and cracking and popping and all kinds of stuff all the time because the spacecraft is constantly expanding and contracting. Remember, I told you for 45 minutes, it's 250 degrees on the outside. And for the next 45 minutes, it's minus 250 degrees. So the spacecraft, the structure itself expands and contracts and expands and contracts every time it goes through that 500-degree temperature swing. And sometimes it's like being in I never served in a submarine, but I've heard people who served in submarines talk about hearing the hull pop as they descended and the pressurization in the submarine equalized and stuff. But it's funny sounds inside the spacecraft.
Sir, I think you came close to answering this question. Did you ever miss home? Matthew Bowman wants to know.
Matthew, every single time I flew to space, and I haven't talked to everybody, but I talked to a lot of people. You're so busy that you don't have time to miss home until you get close to time to come home. And I think I remember this from deployments. You know, you were really busy at sea, and then all of a sudden you're about a week or two away from getting home, and man, you just can't wait to get home. And it was like that every single flight I did. My last couple of days, I was really anxious to get home because I wanted to see my family and my kids. But up until those last few days, you know, when there was this certainty of going home, I was just too busy working to miss being home. And nowadays, the astronauts, actually, everybody has their own little space on board. It's a cubicle, and they have access to FaceTime, email, you know, they can call on the phone, they can do all kinds of stuff. So they actually can be in touch with their families just like you and I do. The speed is not, it's not high-speed internet, but they have internet and everything.
Sir, there's many more questions, but I'm getting the hook. And so I think we are moving on to the next speaker.
Yes, ma'am. General Richardson, ma'am, thank you. Major General Bolden, sir, that was phenomenal. That was absolutely phenomenal. To hear from an astronaut, to hear your message, it was so powerful and well received by everyone.
Excuse me, Mr. Bowen.
Sir, we're going to go to Dr. Cynthia Warwick, President of Stillman College.
We give him a big hand before he...
To close this out.
Excuse me, Mr. Bowman.
Yes.
What college degree do you have?
Oh, what college degree do I graduated from the Naval Academy with a Bachelor of Science in electrical science. And then I went back to grad school at the University of Southern California and got a master's in systems management.
That is awesome. Thank you, young man. All right, Dr. Warwick and Vice Brewer.
Well, it's been a great day, and I thank you again for allowing me to participate. As the president of Stillman College, I was very impressed with the questions that the young people speakers, and I think that says a lot about your interests and your future. I think your futures are all very bright. I would like to encourage all of you today to think about planning to attend a service academy or a university or college that has ROTC. I think it's so important today because, and especially parents on the call, the military, even if you don't want
Hello?
they have every job today in corporate America, in healthcare, and research. It's all in our military services. And the cost of higher education today is so expensive that if you go to a service academy or through ROTC, you can reduce that cost of your education significantly. You know, of course, in service academies, you don't pay for your tuition, and I can't tell you enough, to come out of college with a degree with no debt is really what you ought to be thriving for, because just like many of the last question was asked, what's your degrees? Well, I have an undergraduate degree in pharmacy. I have a master's degree. I have a certificate from UCLA. I have a PhD. And the only one of those degrees that I did not have debt or have to pay for myself was my doctorate. And so you just don't understand the value of the service academies and ROTC in terms of funding your education, because I know everyone on this call today is going to college. But let's be smart about how you fund that education and, you know, and these opportunities that you have for your bright future. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Warwick. And now Vice Admiral Brewer for our thanking guests and panelists. Over to you, sir.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank my good friend, General Bolden, for that phenomenal presentation. He is a hero to all of us. We watched him grow. It's not bad that he's from the mighty South Carolina, where my wife, where I married a woman from Winsboro, South Carolina, right outside of his hometown of Columbia. So I know that culture very well, and they are all successful. My wife also is has her doctorate degree as well. So it must be something in that water down there in South Carolina. Young people, I just want to say this, that what you heard today is wisdom. And don't ever forget that. You know, there's knowledge, there's a lot of things, but then the one thing that separates people, successful people from people who are not successful, is wisdom. And what does wisdom mean? Wisdom means not only do you have knowledge, but you got common sense. And don't ever forget that. Common sense. I know a lot of smart guys who, frankly speaking, could quote chapter and verse when it came to formulas, etc., but couldn't think their way out of a paper bag when it came to common sense. And that is what makes great leaders. Wisdom, common sense, being able to relate to other human beings, as I talked about ladder builder and ladder climber. Now, I want to leave y'all with one question, and then I'm going to leave you with one quote. Okay? Okay. One question is, what is the world's most powerful computer? I want to see it in chat. What is the world's most powerful computer? All right. The brain, the human brain, is the world's most powerful computer. somebody said smartphones, not quite. But anyway, so the bottom line is use your brain. If you use your brain and you maximize the capacity in your brain, then you will be successful. Now, your brain needs food in order to perform. And so I'm going to leave you with this one quote. If I read, I will succeed. I want you all to say that to yourselves. If I read, I will succeed. Because when you read, you are feeding your brain. And your brain will be able to reach out and grab information and knowledge and relate to experiences simply because you are reading. And like you've already heard, you do not have to read just textbooks. You should read books, period. And you will also begin to understand who is successful, who's not successful. You will get perfect examples of people who you should emulate and people who you should avoid. And you will also be able to relate those situations to current leadership. But more importantly, as you grow, as you finish high school, as you finish college, you will need the most successful students when I was in college were the students who read. So remember that. If I read, I will succeed. Good luck to you.
Thank you very much, Admiral Brewer. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. A great panel. Don't forget your post-event survey. And we'd like everyone to come turn your computers on, get picture ready. We're going to take one photo. Juan, Ray, in 30 seconds, let's go ahead and take this photo and tell us, Ray.
Can I say just one thing while we taking that photo?
Yes, sir.
The major goal of this today, you'll find some imperfections here, but the major goal that we had was to make ourselves accessible to the students. So we'd really like, if you have further questions or you need a mentor or you need help, as you know, John Bolden really, all his examples will show you what you can get from us. So don't hesitate to do that. You've got our email addresses, call on us.
Yes, sir. And Admiral Davis, what we'll do is we'll send everyone the information so that they have it and follow up after the post-event survey. All right. So everyone, pictures on, faces ready. Look into your cameras. And let's go ahead and go so we can get ready to see the space launch tomorrow. All right. All right. 1, 2, 3, snap. Great. And Ray, let me know when we're all done. All right. I want to thank Ray and Quan for doing this. You all have a great weekend. We thank you all. And join us next time, BEYA.org, and we'll see you online for the next event next quarter.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Love it.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Quan. Thank all of you.
Thank you.